Hello everyone, welcome back to Math Online. I'm Mr. Solis, and on today's video, we will talk about how to use the sine and cosine ratio to find missing sides. Today's objective is, students will be able to use the sine and cosine ratio to find a missing side of a right triangle. Now, let's move on to the next slide. Alright, before we move on though, I want to go over this really quick. These are the three trigonometric ratios that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks, right? Last week we did tangent. This week we're gonna talk about sine and cosine. But we already discussed which one's the opposite, hypotenuse and adjacent, and which ratio is which one, right? But here's an easy way to remember the ratios themselves. So here we have a phrase. Okay, and this phrase is pronounced SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so if you remember SOHCAHTOA, you can remember all three ratios. Okay, here's how it works. The first letter that you see is the trig function. So in this case, it starts with an S, it must be sine. The second one starts with the C, then it must be cosine. The third one starts with the T, then it must be tangent. Okay, now the last two letters on SOHCAHTOA, these last two letters tell you what the ratio looks like. Opposite over hypotenuse. This ratio says adjacent over hypotenuse. This ratio says opposite over adjacent. And that's exactly what you can see right here. Okay, so now in these triangles down here, the angle of interest would actually be the blue area that it's shaded here, or purple. I'm not sure, I'm colorblind, guys, so you guys tell me. But anyways, this is the angle of interest, the one shaded in blue or purple. So what you do is, across the angle of interest, you will always find the opposite side. We talked about this many times, right? So for sine, all you need is opposite and hypotenuse. For cosine, even though this is across the angle of interest, you still have opposite side. You don't need it. It's not necessary for cosine. All you need is the adjacent side and hypotenuse. But you still might want to label it as a reference. In this case, for tangent, this is the angle of interest. So across from it, you always find the opposite side. And across the 90 degree is hypotenuse, but you don't need it for tangent. But you might want to label it as a reference. So the missing leg should, by default, should be adjacent. And it was labeled as you see. So once again, first letter tells you the trig function, and the last two letters tells you the ratio. Okay, hopefully this helps. So you may want to stop the video, take notes of this, and use it in your homework. Okay, SOHCAHTOA, memorize that, guys, please. All right, let's move on. All right, so the instructions that you see on the top, where it says using your calculator, those are referring to the instructions to an iPhone calculator. Okay, so these are the instructions that I would use in order to calculate these problems on my iPhone calculator. Okay, it might work with yours, but like I mentioned on previous videos, it all depends. Everybody has a different calculator depending on their phone. Mine's an iPhone, yours could be an Android, and there's so many other types of phones, right? So it might work with yours, but guarantee you that if you have an iPhone, it's gonna work with yours. But if you don't have an iPhone calculator, no need to worry. We have the website desmos.com to go to in order to use a calculator, right? And I'll show you how to do that again in case you forgot. So that's what I'm going to be using to solve these problems. So the question tells us, find the value rounded to the nearest 10,000ths. Well, what does 10,000ths mean? If you guys remember from the previous video, when they're asking to round to the nearest 10,000, that's referring to 4 decimal places after the decimal point. So here we go. Cosine of 17. What is that equal to? What is the value of cosine of 17 degrees? So what we do is we go to our calculator. I already have it on desmos.com, as you guys can see. Here's the link, Desmos on the top. I'm going to highlight it, desmos.com. There it is. That's where you go to. So it's going to take you to this page, right? This is the home page of desmos.com. So what you want to do is on this bottom portion, left-hand side, it says for function and scientific. All you have to do is click on scientific. You click on that and it automatically takes you to the Desmos calculator. All right, now that we are here, make sure that your calculator says degrees, because if you don't have degrees, your calculator will give you the wrong answer. Hopefully you guys remember from our previous video. We type in cosine of how many degrees? 17 degrees, guys. And there it is. It gives us our values. And let's go back to this. I'm going to copy and paste it like we did on the previous video. So this would be our answer. So we paste it here to make our life easier. Is it going to paste? Let's see. Oh, there it is, guys. So this is our answer, right? But we don't want this entire answer, right? We only need to round to the nearest 10,000, which is 4 decimal values. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And like we said on the previous video, once you have your 4 values, 1, 2, 3, 4, you look at the next value. Is that number 5 or bigger? No, it's not. It's smaller than 5, right? So therefore, the 10,000 value remains the same. So our answer should just be, this is equal to 0.9, whoops, that's a sloppy 9563. That's the value for cosine of 17 degrees. Okay, so that'll be our answer. Well, hopefully, you guys remember that when we're rounding to the nearest 10,000, all that means is to write 4 values after the decimal point, okay? But you got to check the next value after the 10,000's value, okay? So that's going to determine whether your 10,000 value increases by 1 or remains the same, okay? All right, so let's move on to the next slide. If you guys are ready, here we go. All right, next scenario, find the value, round to the nearest 10,000s. So same idea, guys. So we're going to go back to our calculator in just a second. I'm going to put the equal sign just to have it ready. So I'm going to go back to our calculator and type in, to actually clear the screen. And we're going to type in sine of 65 degrees. It gives us our answer. So I'm going to copy and paste this once again. So we go back to our lesson. I'll paste this on the screen. We just wait for answer. I'll make it bigger. And once again, we need to round to the nearest 10,000. So I need 4 decimal values after the decimal points. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And after the 10,000 value, I look at the next value and say, hey, is that number 5 or bigger? In this other case, it's not. So therefore, the 10,000's value remains the same, which is that 3 right there. It's going to remain the same. So our answer should be sine of 65 degrees is equal to 0.9063. That should be our answer. Okay. All right. So go ahead and try it. Pause the video and do it on your own. Go. All right. So time's up. Let's see if you guys did this correct. So sine of 27 is equal to, sine of 27 degrees is equal to, let's type this in so it looks nice and neat, is equal to, if you guys did this correct, it should have been 0.4540 if you rounded correctly as well. Okay. So that's what our answer should be for the first scenario. Okay, like this kind of moved, but oh well, no big deal. All right, next. So on this one, cosine of 41, if you did this correctly, you should have got 0.7547. That's what you should have got, 7547 after the decimal point. Okay, so hopefully you guys are doing this correctly. If not, remember to rewind and say bzzz, and hit play again so you can see how we did the previous examples. Okay. All right, let me highlight this in blue so you know that that's your answer. So with that said, let's move on to the next slide where we will have new scenarios. All right, so next question. Find the length of the missing leg. Round to the nearest tenth. So the first thing we need to understand is what does it mean to round to the nearest tenth, right? And we talked about this on the previous video. And so rounding to the nearest 10 just means that we need 1 value after the decimal point. That's all you need, okay? So what we want to do in order to solve this problem is find the length of this missing leg here. This leg, want to know what is the measurement of X? What is the measurement of this leg? How many units is it? Okay, so here's the thing. I have this here as a note. It tells us first, figure out if you are using sine or cosine. Now, in some cases, you're going to have to figure out if you're going to use sine, cosine, or even tangent, right? So what I'm going to ask you for these type of problems is that when you get to these problems, before you do anything, always label your sides. What side is the opposite side? What side is the adjacent side? And what side is the hypotenuse side? So first of all, we need to find where is the 90-degree angle. And as we mentioned before, the 90-degree angle is just a box, right? So across the 90-degree angle, we will always find what side, guys? Hypotenuse. Great. So across the 90-degree angle, you will always find the hypotenuse. Okay, so we talked about this on the previous videos. So if you forgot, please go back to that. Okay, so across the 90-degree angles, we have the hypotenuse. Now the next step is to identify or find the angle of interest. And I told you guys, the angle of interest will always have a tiny little circle on the right side. So it's going to be a number, or it could be a variable, of course. It's going to be a number in this case with a tiny little circle on the right side. So as you can see, the 10 does not have a tiny little circle on the right side. The X does not have a tiny little circle on the right side, but the 23 does have a tiny little circle on the right side. So therefore, 23 degrees is the angle of interest. That little circle actually means degrees once again. So the angle of interest is 23. Okay, so remember from previous videos, across the angle of interest, we will always find what side? The opposite side. Great, and we label it O. All right, so now if you know the opposite side, you know the hypotenuse, the side remaining that is unknown has to be the adjacent side by default. Oh, but let me use a different color, guys, so we don't get confused. So let me use this color now. This is the adjacent. Now, here's the thing. I label all three sides, opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent, but only two of these sides has a number or a variable. You need to focus, you need to concentrate on the two legs that had either a number or a variable. So in this case, does the adjacent side have a measurement? No, it doesn't. Do you see this adjacent side? There is no measurements for the adjacent side. So therefore, we don't need adjacent side. All we need is opposite because it has a measurement, it has X. We need the hypotenuse because it has a measurement, which is 10 units. So you're going to have to use the given sides, the sides that were given to you, not the unknown, right? You don't know nothing about the adjacent. You don't know what the measurement of the opposite side is. That's what you're trying to find out. But you know that what it was labeled as X. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. All right, so therefore, we are using the opposite side and the hypotenuse side. So therefore, which trigonometric ratio satisfies those two sides? And everyone should be saying sine, right? So we're going to say sine of how many degrees? 23 degrees, right? That's the angle of interest. It always goes there. Sine of 23 degrees is equal to opposite side over the hypotenuse, right? That's how we've been doing our ratios, okay? So therefore, now we're going to substitute our values. We know that the opposite side only measures X. We don't know what it is. We're going to find out. So we're going to say sine, once again, of 23 degrees is equal to, the opposite side only is X, because we don't know what the actual number is, over, the hypotenuse is actually 10 units, no big deal. So there it is. So now we have an equation, a number equal to a fraction. As we mentioned before, what we want to do is, if we have a fraction on one side, make sure to convert the other number into a fraction. So sine of 23 degrees can be converted into a fraction by writing it over 1. Once you have a proportion, a nice and sweet proportion, we could use the cross product rule to solve the problem, right? And hopefully you guys remember from previous videos, in order to solve this, we're going to multiply across. So 1 times x will give us x, right? X is equal to, remember I said always start out with the whole number first, and then the sine, tangent, or cosine. So 10 times sine of how many degrees? 23 degrees. Perfect. 23 degrees. There it is. Awesome. So now, using a calculator, right? We're going to go back to our decimals calculator. So we're going to say, all right, going back, we're going to clear the screen, and we're going to type in 10, whoops, not type in, click on 10 times sine of 23 degrees, and it gives us our length, our measurements. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Boom. Copy. And we're going to paste this on our slide. I'm going to actually move down. So I copied down my answer from decimals.com calculator. So now we need to round to the nearest 10th place, right? So therefore, that means that we need one decimal value after the decimal points. So here we go. This is the 10th place, right? So that's one decimal value after the decimal points. So therefore, we need to look at the next value and say, is that number 5 or bigger? No, it's not. So in this case, our answer should be x is equal to 3.9. And hopefully you guys remember how to round to the nearest 10th. So in this case, the length of x, or the length of this leg, is equal to 3.9 units. Okay. And you can always use the SOHCAHTOA, like I mentioned earlier. So remember to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay. It's really easy to remember that. And you could write your ratios right away. Okay. So here we go. Next one. I want you to pause the video, give it a try, do it on your own, challenge yourself, and once you figure it out, check your answer, play the video and check your answer and see if you got it right, okay? Make sure that you're actually labeling all the sides and figuring out what trig function are you going to use, sine or cosine, or maybe even tangent when it comes to future assignments. So here we go. Pause the video, try it, and then check your answer. So last example, here we go. So let's do this now that you have time to try it on your own. So first of all, we want to label our sides, right? So let's check out the 90-degree angle. Where's the 90-degree angle? Where's the box at? Oh, there's the box. So across the 90-degree angle, we will always find what side, guys? The hypotenuse. Great. There's your H, hypotenuse. Well, actually, that's a horrible H, guys. Let's do that again. There's your H. And that looks like an H now. Great. So after the 90-degree angle, we need to find the angle of interest. The angle of interest will always contain a tiny little circle on the right side. So does the X contain a little circle on the right side? No. Does the 20 contain a little circle on the right side? No, it doesn't. The 40 contains a little circle on the right side. So therefore, this is the angle of interest. And across the angle of interest, we always find the opposite side. Okay? Awesome. All right, so we have the hypotenuse side, we have the opposite side. Right, so therefore, the leg with the 20 unit measurement should be, by default, the adjacent side. Okay? All right, so once you label all the legs with a specific name like opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent, now we need to figure out which trig function are we going to use, which trigonometric ratio are we going to use. So here's the thing. Well, they gave us two legs, right? The X and the 20, or in other words, they gave us the measurement of the hypotenuse with the variable, they gave us the measurement of the adjacent with the number, so therefore, we need to focus on the trig function that contains the hypotenuse and the adjacent. So in case you forgot, I'm going to go ahead and type this in again. We need to write our SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so there's our SOHCAHTOA. So remember, the first letter tells you what function it is: sine, cosine, tangent, right? And the last two letters will tell you the ratio. So therefore, we're looking for a function that contains the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. Which one is it? Cosine, right? All right, so hopefully you can see that. Otherwise, pause the video and look at your SOHCAHTOA. All right, so here we go. So therefore, we're using cosine again. So we're going to use cosine of how many degrees? Let me actually type this because the mouse it's just horrible, guys, to write. All right, so cosine of 40 degrees is equal to what ratio, guys? So it should be adjacent over hypotenuse. Therefore, we need to write adjacent over the hypotenuse. And let's go ahead and substitute these values. So we got cosine, whoops, sorry for the handwriting, cosine of 40 degrees is equal to what ratio? What's the adjacent side? What is the measurement? 20 units, right? Do we know the measurement of the hypotenuse? Not exactly, but we know that it was labeled with the next. So let's put an X here. All right, So now we want to create a proportion. So if we have a fraction on the right side, we want to make sure to have a fraction on the left side as well. And we do that by converting this number into a fraction by writing it over 1. And then, so now that we have a nice and sweet proportion, we want to apply the cross product rule in order to solve for x, to find the length of the missing leg. All right, so here we go. We're going to apply the cross product rule, and let me use this color now. We're going to apply this by multiplying across. So 1 times 20 will give us 20. If you guys remember how to multiply, yay. So 20 is equal to the next product here, so that'll be cosine of 40 degrees times x. Remember, I like to write down the whole number first or the variable. So in this case, x will go first, times the cosine of 40 degrees, cosine of 40 degrees. Okay, there it is. All right, so now once again, we have a nice equation that has no longer a fraction, so we don't have to worry about this. All we have to do is use inverse operations in order to isolate the variable. We want to leave x by itself, so look at your operation. What is this operation called? Multiplication, right? So therefore, all we have to do is the opposite of multiplication, which is division. We want x by itself, so we need to get rid of cosine of 40 degrees. So let's divide by cosine of 40 degrees on both sides, okay? So there it is. And we divide cosine 40 degrees on both sides, and we go ahead and simplify this. So we're gonna get 1 here, a number over itself, it just becomes 1. So we're left with x is equal to whatever this number is. So we go back to our calculator and we clear this, and we say 20 divided by cosine of how many degrees, guys? 40 degrees, and it gives us our answer. So the missing leg is actually 26.1 units long. So copy and paste it now. So paste it here. There it is. All right. So now, if we were to round this, remember, we're looking at the 10th place. So this is the 10th place. We look at the next value. Is that number 5 or bigger? No, it's not. Therefore, our answer should be 26.1 units equal to x. So the missing leg that we're trying to find measures 26.1 units. There it is. That's how you solve these problems. Now remember, it's not always going to be the cosine trig function, so just make sure to label all your 3 sides and then identify what are the 2 sides that they gave you. Did they give you adjacent, hypotenuse, or opposite and hypotenuse, or adjacent and opposite side? Okay. All right. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, remember to drop me a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. And let's close our video like always. And remember, we teach a new lesson like this one almost every single day. I'm Mr. Solis, and I'll see you on the next one.